I say, welcome to Voyager, please. A hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant. I don't know why. I was trying to do like the stupid Southern accent that we get to hear. This fucking turd-ass episode.
Like a foghorn, leghorn type
I
deal?
was. I gave up on it literally 3 seconds after I started. And my name is Joseph.
I'm Peter. I'm the one who's not doing racist accents.
Is it racist to make fun of Southern people? I don't have my like woke meter here, so I don't know. I haven't gotten a memo on that.
Was foghorn leghorn supposed to be black?
No, he's supposed to be a Southern like plantation-ish guy, you know?
I think
like...
if you say plantation, there's a racist implication.
Plantation owner. Very different. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio's character from Django Unchained.
Oh yeah, the epitome of racial equality. Okay.
Speaking of mistakes, I think we have our first...
Oh, I thought you were going to go into this episode already.
Speaking of less severe mistakes, we have our first Voyager Please Moops moment, I think. To those of you who are not personal friends of Peter and I, there's a group of us that thanks to our friend Jason Clark, refer to a particularly big oops moment as a moops, because an oops just won't do.
Mm.
And we kind of moopsed pretty hard when we encouraged everyone to sign up for our Facebook discussion group, and then didn't realize that if we weren't logged into our Facebook page, then we couldn't see anybody who asked to join who wasn't personal friends of ours.
Yeah.
So there was like 9 people waiting to like get approved that just sat there, some of them for months. Sorry, our bad. We're old, and we suck.
I am a big Google guy, and I was all about Google Plus, all 12 of us, and that has fallen and died, and begrudgingly we're all in Facebook now, and my Facebook foo is not that strong, and yeah. Sorry, but welcome to the family, and if you out there would like to join a waiting list to join our little Star Trek closed group for 4 months yourself, swing through Facebook and check out the Voyager Please Trauma Support Group.
Yes, now we'll actually approve you right away, because we figured it out.
Go us.
Sorry.
Up next is going to be us tackling how the hell Twitter works.
Well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, Peter, and we're both still here, so what made us stronger this week?
Season 3, Episode 11, Q and the Gray.
Okay, so when we talked about Death Wish, what seems like an eternity ago, I warned you that this was going to happen, right? I warned you, like, the sins of Death Wish isn't that episode is particularly god-awful bad. It's that it sets the stage for some of the most atrocious shit you will ever see. Did I undersell it or oversell it? How on the mark was I?
I don't think I was ready for how bad this episode ended up being.
You never can really be ready.
Because
Like,
there's a lot of ways to be bad, and this one just, to me, shit the bed at an exponential rate, and...
It really did. Like, as the running time increased, it got progressively exponentially worse, until it reached some sort of terrible fractal at the end of the curve, just, like, ascended into a new state of shittiness.
What's going to be interesting about talking through this episode is it does so many things that every one of our podcasts I harp on as something I want, and that's using continuity, building off previous Voyager episodes, using old Star Trek lore, and living in this environment that they have already created. And we just had at our mess hall, talked about how these shows are built so they can be run in a vacuum. And this episode in particular really tightly clutches to so many episodes before it, specifically the Winnie the Q one, and even Warlord, because they're using scenes out of the new Neelix sex planet.
That is correct.
And they take all these things that I thought I wanted and they go in terrible directions with them.
Before we launch into the actual episode description, I want to take a second to go to Memory Alpha. Have you looked at how this episode was received?
I can't believe it. And I was going to save that to the end. There's two things that shocked the hell out of me on this Memory Alpha. One is the widespread praise that this thing got from whatever little review sites that they query. And two is every single member of the cast just gushing over how wonderful it was and how great. And John Delancey, who's appears to be a very crotchety person that is quick to shoot Star Trek the Bird and kind of be irreverent to his role within the franchise, loving this thing. And it's like, I can't tell if this is just Hollywood career protection where people are like behind closed doors, like this was a terrible fucking thing, but on the record, like, oh, it was wonderful and beautiful and such a sweet episode. But man, just, or maybe you and I are just weirdo aliens who don't get it.
I don't think we are. I think that this is a dividing point of the kind of fan of Star Trek you are. I think I can understand that if you're a casual fan of Star Trek, that this was probably fine. It might have even been enjoyable. The kind of Star Trek fan who hates this is the kind of Star Trek fan who loves the things we love and appreciates Star Trek as being this semi-serious, at the very least, attempt at doing hard sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
And we like the world, and we like the continuity, and we like the stakes, and we like the deep storytelling. That's what we love about Star Trek. And the best parts of how Q was used in our favorite Star Trek show is a big part of that. And so I read all of this, and I, too, had the same reaction you did of, like, what the fuck? Actual shit? Cock, non-fuck shit crap is this? Like, I couldn't barely believe that all of these people were self-filleting themselves over this shitty episode that reduced the Q to a bunch of cartoon characters. But then I realized, for a lot of people that consume Star Trek far more casually, they are cartoon characters. So this is fine. You know,
there's not going to be a lot of meat on the bone to get into with a play-by-play on this episode. So before we get into the review, I want to have this Q discussion up front.
Yeah. Me too. Like, if you, to our audience, if you're tuning in for the blow-by-blow we usually do, with shades of elogium, we're probably not going to. The episode itself is not the interesting thing to talk about. It's the meta story and what this does to the Q and how it was constructed and our problems with it. So strap yourself in, folks. It's going to get pretty fucking dank. Our neck beards are going to start to sprout a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what's up. So strap yourself in.
Q to me is this weird side of Star Trek. Because Star Trek, like you said, it's grounded in science and politics and real decisions, and there's this real human element, and it can get gritty and all that other stuff. And then you've got these Q episodes where it just gets fantastic and very clearly moves into fantasy. And it's not something where you can just disregard and say, well, that was a one-off. Like, the Star Trek that we focus on and that we have all, you and I have come up on, 24th century Star Trek, Q was right there off the jump. He's Encounter at Farpoint. He is all good things. This isn't a sideshow that you can just pick and choose when you want to acknowledge that it's part of the universe, right? Q is in the DNA of 24th century Star Trek. And he brings a lot of interesting things to the episodes that he come into. And sometimes they can be a little silly, but pointed. And sometimes they're very fucking scary. Encounter at Farpoint, Q was terrifying. He was a malevolent, evil thing out there that was judging humanity. His actions that tossed the Enterprise into the Delta Quadrant initially, where they encountered the Borg for the first time, and the entire chain of events that the Borg, had impact on the Alpha Quadrant, all terrifying space horror stuff. And that's all laid directly at his feet. So he's this real serious power player. And do you like Batman?
I do.
I love Batman. And I hate JLA Batman, because Batman in his own comics and his own, animated series and stuff like that, it's a dude who is a peak human performer and has a ton of money and is smart, but is ultimately just a man who is relying on some parlor tricks and kung fu to get his way through the day. And they're real gritty, grounded stories. And they're cool. He's the best at what he does, and he goes against the worst humanity has to offer. And then you put Batman in the JLA, and now he's standing side by side with Green Lantern and Superman and these people with godlike powers. And he kind of gets turned into like this ridiculous precog who is just off the charts. I have an answer for every question and a doodad for everything. And he's, kicking other gods' asses, shoulder to shoulder, his gods. You can't look at these people as the same guy. There's Batman in Gotham, and then there's whatever this JLA Batman is. And
right.
I think
like, I know exactly what you mean. The sort of character inflation.
Yeah.
Like, he would be too much of a buster compared to these guys if they actually portrayed him the way that he probably should be portrayed, so they have to inflate him.
Right. And I think that's kind of the way you have to look at these Q things. You can't ignore Q in Star Trek as the science story, right? There's the regular Star Trek episodes, and then you've got these JLA Q episodes, and they're good. They're good for what they do. It moves between the two of them. Again, you get stuff like the Borg and some of the other Q impacts, but by and large, the Q, it's a thing in Star Trek. It's there, but it's not easily accessible. They're quick to forget. If Q had a presence all the time, it would destroy what Star Trek is. So they compartmentalize them, right? I would have liked to see an episode somewhere where they're just like, Q cannot be a magic genie that Starfleet captains call on at their time of greatest need. And he is the most dangerous thing that Starfleet has ever encountered. And any interactions with him have to be treated as like a Omega level threat. Here's a Bible you must play by, because ultimately we're dealing with something that could, with a snap of his finger, erase our entire civilization, right? Like, that's how scary and crazy dangerous Q is in my mind. And then you get this episode, which just pulls his teeth out and like you said, turns him into a fucking Elmer Fudd character.
I don't want to discount that in TNG, there's occasional silliness when it comes to Q. You've got the episode where Q gets turned into a human. It's definitely like a lighter tone. There's the stuff with Vash. That's obviously a bit of a lighter tone. But even in those episodes, they don't tell you too much about Q. They don't tell you anything about what Q is really. And it plays into his kind of trickster god persona more appropriately. And all of his other episodes, though, he's used in a way that I think is really cool for the show, in that he represents the unknown. We sort of talked about this in Death Wish, but it's worth going over again. He represents that which the Federation cannot truly explain, comprehend, or control as a force. And in a way, he presents himself as the bookend at the beginning and the end of the show to demonstrate if humanity has progressed enough to be worthy of the continuation of exploration in the galaxy, right? And we've theorized that Q's actual motivation for this could be that he is trying to raise humanity over the course of, millennia to be a successor to the Q for whatever it is that they do, right? As the guardians of the galaxy, so to speak. Something like that. So even though it is somewhat magical, we'll say, it fits within this universe as the representation of something that they can't control with the 24th century super science they already possess. There's some things bigger and better than the whole introduction to the Borg being a perfect example of Q doing exactly like that. Like, going to Picard and saying, oh, you think you're hot shit, huh? Well, hold on. Beat these guys. You can't fucking negotiate with these monsters, can you? Now beg me to save you.
Yeah.
Like, I love it, okay? I love it. And Death Wish, when we were reviewing it, we even said then, like, the idea behind some of these tangents they go on isn't necessarily bad. Like the idea that there's some discontent within the continuum, that there's some Q that wants some more agency in their lives.
Stagnation.
What role humanity might play in that? Why are they so interested in them? Something that you could have told them something, but not too much. But what did we settle on? It's like when they decide to go to the Q Continuum and have that whole scene, they start to tell you way too much, right? And once the mystery is gone, that's a problem.
I think this is what we call the dark elf treatment, right?
Yeah, the drow treatment. Like the R.A. Salvatore, everyone loves Drizzt so much, we're gonna fucking just overuse this shit.
We're going to implicitly detail the strengths and the weakness and the culture and whatever you might have had in your own head as a possibility. We're going to explicitly dispel some of those thoughts, and we are going to use our poor writing team power to spell out exactly what these guys are, and it's going to be a big disappointment. So you've had this galactic menace that, jumping back into the TNG episodes, and I can't speak for DS9, so I don't know how he was really used there, but like the one where he got his power stripped, I thought that was still a great episode because, and a scary episode, because you see the reach and the problems that this guy has caused across the galaxy, and they come knocking, and it's a good intersection of fantasy and Starfleet bureaucracy, and how do you treat this guy who has now become a political refugee or whatever. But where we go in this episode is to the hilt, showing you everything you never wanted to see about the Q. I think the best that this episode gets is the beginning. Like many Voyager episodes, they pack a lot of cool world building about Starfleet and life on a starship and whatever in the pre-credit scene, right? So when they're all standing on the bridge and watching a supernova, which is a pretty rare occurrence for Starfleet to actually be around to witness. They said something like, what, only 5% of Starfleet ships get to witness this or something?
I think it was like 2, period. 2 have witnessed it.
And they're all standing around and clapping. I thought that was a really cool scene. I thought it would have been really neat if they were all in the holodeck, like standing there around holograms watching it happen instead of just the view screen. But, I get 97 TV budget. But unlike a lot of these cold openings, this scene is going to directly tie into later as to why they actually had why they had the opportunity to see this star go supernova.
I have to say, like, when you can say that the part of the episode where all the sexual harassment happens is the good part, that's sad. But sure enough, they're standing around, they watch the supernova, they ooh and ah over it. Snarf gets really excited. Ultimately, though, Janeway looks exhausted. Chakotay calls her on and go, why don't you hit the hay instead of doing more analysis on this? We'll take a look at the stuff tomorrow. And she says, sure. She goes down to her quarters, and they're done up like the fucking honeymoon suite in a hotel. And sure enough, Q is there in his bathrobe, looking like that character that Christopher Walken plays on Saturday Night Live, and looking for love from Kathy Janeway.
My favorite part of this scene is that she calls for security. And I think that that stands out as perhaps the most ridiculous part of this entire terrible episode. Like, what are 2 guys with phasers, 2 security people who have already gotten their asses kicked by Ferengi? What are they possibly going to do to Q other than maybe get turned into popsicles?
Or desold on accident or whatever. Like, one of the things among the many that I hate about this episode is the detached bemusement and disrespect that the entire crew shows to Q in the first 15-20 minutes. I mean, we're going to be treated to the likes of Tom Paris and Harry Kim talking shit to a space god They don't give a fuck. They're like, oh, you're just a fucking asshole, Q. Whatever. We're gonna leave now.
I
Like,
couldn't stand any of that either. I want to spend some time on that specifically when we get to it, because that is a real big deal and a big part of the disservice that this does to the franchise, I think. But in this bedroom, Q starts laying out this agenda of why he's there, and it is that some things have been set into motion and that he has become self-aware and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, he wants to procreate, and he has picked out of all of sentient life in the galaxy Kathryn Janeway to be the mother of his child.
There is never an explanation as to why. That, aside from her being human, right, that explanation is given that he specifically wanted a human woman because of humanity's compassion. But why it's specifically Kathryn Janeway, other than they'd met before, is never given. But nevertheless, it gives Q this opportunity to clownishly banty about Voyager, both on camera and off camera, for some extended period of time, trying to woo Kathy into banging him and making a baby with him.
So Kenneth Biller is the guy who wrote this script, right? And he, according to Memory Alpha, he did some research in this and wasn't really familiar with the Q subject material. So he went back and watched a couple of episodes, which seemed to me like he just focused on Death Wish, the predecessor, and skipped all of the other Q episodes from Next Gen, where a lot of the stuff that they touch on specifically in this scene, they contradict. One, we know that Q are able to make people fall in love with them, right? Because two, he says, Q have never procreated before, and this is going to be a big deal, and it's so important, and we're going to do this thing, and it's going to change everything. You jump back to the Next Gen episode with Amanda Rogers. What was it? Do you remember that episode was called?
Q2.
Was that Q2?
Maybe. I know what one you're talking about, though.
True Q. So True Q from Next Gen, and if this Mike Biller guy is going to watch anything here, Kenneth Biller is going to watch anything, Q2 touches on all the stuff before. Q have procreated, right? Q split off from the Continuum. They went to Earth. They set their powers aside. They had a child with normal conception methods. She grew up thinking she was human. The Continuum found out about her. They killed her parents off with a hurricane or something, and she ended up on the Enterprise. And so yeah, Q can reproduce, and they are a big deal. That was a whole episode all about that. And in that episode specifically, Amanda Rogers used her Q powers to force Riker to fall in love with her, and then she was quickly disenchanted by the notion of that, because she still had these human values and understood that, consent and all that stuff's a big part of love, and that what she was getting, whatever. So if Q really wanted to win this, and we'll find out that there's a civil war going on within the Continuum, if he really did think that mating with Kathryn Janeway was going to be the answer to all this, he could have just snapped his fingers, made him fall in love, and done whatever he was ultimately going to do. But yeah, like you said, why does it have to be Janeway? Certainly she's got some skin in the game because she was an advocate to let Winnie the Q kill himself. Yeah, was that the
right? She was the one that ultimately made the decision to allow Quinn to have mortality, and but yeah, they don't explain why. And
if it's just DNA they wanted, I mean, they could have taken DNA from anywhere. If he wanted it to be specifically Kathryn Janeway's, he could have made her fall in love. There's all this precedent that just gets ignored.
Or at least explained why he specifically wanted Kathryn Janeway and why he specifically wanted her to want to do it. They don't do any of that. And it just seems to be an excuse so that John Delancey can go around and
clown it up, like you said.
Be a cartoon character and, be this lovesick, lovelorn, attempting to impress Captain Janeway, try and bro down with Tom and Harry for relationship advice, talk shit to Snarf. Probably
what's he call him? You, bar rodent, another drink.
Yes. Best line of the episode.
Followed up by the second best line, which is him slamming on Chakotay's face tattoo. And he's like, what's Chuckles over here got that I don't? A face tattoo? Well, I've got a better one. And like his entire half of his face is like tribal tattoo crap, but no, the bar rodent slam I thought was really good. But yeah, we get this 10 minutes or no, maybe about 10 minutes or so of Q interacting with the crew at large. And it's what I was talking about before, that there has to be a memo out there that says like, this guy, I don't know if you're into SCP at all.
I certainly know what it is.
The secure, contain, protect, spooky internet Wikipedia thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, you're going to classify Q as a Euclid level threat, right? This guy is like as bad as it can get. He can unwrite humanity if he wants. And the flippant, casual manner, and you know, the crew says, look, we've read the Enterprise's files on you. We know what you're about. And we're going to sit there and like try and diss you. Like, Q is responsible for a lot of Federation deaths. Yeah. And to treat this guy like he's, you know, the dude who works at the smoothie place at the mall, I don't know, man. It doesn't work for me.
Let's dive back into why this episode doesn't work. This seems like the good time to do it. So, for me, all of this is stupid because in the only other episodes where Q sort of conveys the sort of personal interest in people, it's because he has some kind of interest in kind of watching them interact with their environment. So he fucks with Picard and everybody in the holodeck and the whole everyone's in the Robin Hood thing, right? Yeah. Or all the shit with Vash. He's just kind of like having fun poking with his fucking gerbils, right? Like, that's what it looks like. It's like Q taking a little bit of a mental break and just kind of playing with some people, seeing what they do.
Like a scientist.
He's
like a scientist with mice in a maze. When he turned Riker into Q to see how that worked out, he never regards these little ant people as peers. And the notion that he would go to any of these people, realistically trying to get real advice, like this guy's, I'm going to screw this word. Omnipotent, right?
Yeah.
You've got a guy who knows everything about everything, and he's going to go to fucking Harry Kim and ask how to get into Kathryn Janeway's pants.
It seems like he's desperately failing, which is not something that Q does. Ever. And it starts the episode on the wrong foot, at the very least. And it gets exponentially worse because what we find out is that this is all happening because Q's accidentally started a Q civil war. And this gets conveyed when his Q girlfriend shows up.
This is a sequel episode in two ways. The first way we can say is that this is a direct result of Death Wish, where Winnie the Q dies. The second way that this is a part of a trilogy, if you will, is way back in Next Gen, when we had the episode where Worf's girlfriend comes on the ship, and Worf finds out that he is a daddy. They introduce Alexander Rozhenko, and we've got Clear, his half human, half Klingon baby mama. And Next Gen makes a mistake in killing her off. I thought she was a great character back then, and I thought it was a real squander of talent. It was a mistake to put Alexander Rozhenko as a regular fixture on Next Gen, but it did get Duras iced with a bat left to the chest, so that was pretty cool. But fast forward to here, and Q's girlfriend is Suzy Blackson, who was, again, Worf's baby mama back on Next Gen.
And Claire, and I love that episode. I like that she died because it set the table for, like, the most unexpectedly fuck you ending of a TNG episode of all time, i.e. Worf literally just going to the guy's ship and murdering him, and Picard being like, well, that actually solved the problem, and I don't like it.
And I'm not going to hold you accountable for murder.
But I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I love that episode. I kind of like that. That's just kind of where it ended because it isn't what you expected to have happen. Like when I watched it initially, I'm like, "Oh shit, did she die?" Like,
Yeah.
what? So yeah, same actress, and she shows up and it gets conveyed that throughout the episode that because of Quinn dying, uh, there was more of a movement of Q towards self-determination and whatever, and the Q that we know, the John DeLance Q, decided to hold the banner for that, blah, blah, blah. Point is, the Q are having a civil war, and it's causing, in real space, supernovas everywhere, which is what kind of clues in the Federation people, like, this is the after effect on real space for all of your bullshit, okay?
They basically hint that the Q Continuum exists purely in subspace. Correct me if I'm wrong.
In some kind of dimension beyond our current perception that impacts subspace, yes, at the very least that.
There's a heavy tie into subspace and whatever is going on in the Q world. And you said that he accidentally caused a civil war. I mean, they make it pretty clear, I think, that Q intentionally is ramrodding this thing. And he made as much known at the end of Death Wish that he was going to push this agenda hard and that there was going to be upheaval. So Suzy Blackson pops in an ill-fitted command jumpsuit, starts talking down to all these little ant people that her boyfriend chooses to play with on a regular basis. And this is, I think, where everything really starts falling. Like, as if all, Q chasing after Janeway wasn't stupid enough. The fact that Q's got a girlfriend, she's playing the jealous girlfriend angle. This real, I don't know, schlocky gods talking to people routine that they've tread over too many times. And ultimately, they get caught next to some supernovas, which they've described are the result of Q weaponry, right? So the Q aren't just telepathically assaulting each other, whatever. They've got like guns, and these guns result in supernovas, and Voyager's going to get caught in it. Janeway's like, hey, get this ship out of here. My crew, I'm worried about their safety. Get us out of here. And then Q takes himself and Janeway away and leaves Suzy Blackson's character, which we'll call Suzy Q, behind with the rest of Voyager to get rocked by these supernovas. And then Janeway finds herself in a old colonial type home. I get excited for a moment and think we might be back in her holo novel, which I somehow have come to appreciate, but no. Q comes walking in a Civil War Union's officer outfit and says that this is another one of his interpretations of the continuum, so her little brain can understand what's going on, and that they are once again in the continuum with a bad skin job over it. Last time it was like that abandoned Route 66 gas station.
Yep.
But now it's I don't know, a southern plantation in the middle of the Civil War with explosions and fires going on outside.
Okay, so all right. Okay.
I hate this episode, Joe.
I don't even want to talk. I don't want to talk about this shit anymore either. The problem is, at its core, that we are talking about immortal beings with godlike powers that have been around since the dawn of time, as far as human beings could possibly conceive of it. And they are portrayed up to this point, and then even worse from this point forward, as being brainless, non-thinking idiots. Cartoon characters that apparently don't think on any kind of second level, let alone as you would expect beings of their sophistication to think. They are ultimately outsmarted by our crew suddenly showing up in their own Civil War uniforms, shooting their own Q weapons at them, and just getting outclassed. Somehow, there's no explanation.
I've got that in my notes. Tom Paris puts the Q general in check with a gun to his head.
Right.
That is ridiculous to me than Tom going warp 10 and turning into a lizard person and having sex with Janeway. Which,
yeah, it is. You're absolutely fucking right. It absolutely is. You're right. And that's what's so fucking sad, is that this episode doesn't know what to do to continue with its idea. It tries to sell this whole this is all a metaphor for what's actually happening, which sort of worked for the one time they did it, but told you too much, but at least I could accept it for that like one scene. But they try and sell half the fucking episode with this stupid Civil War shit, and everyone is a cartoon character, and then it ends like an episode from the goddamn animated series with people cartoonishly running up through enemy lines in these uniforms, shooting guns, no one dies, no one bleeds, nothing bad happens, everything goes back to normal, and the Q just look like buffoons. They don't look scary. They don't seem like the kind of being that holds space and time in their hand, that might be testing humanity for greater purpose, that are scary, facets of the unknown that you can never control and you should always fear. They're fucking clowns. They're clowns that Tom Paris, carrier of all the Delta Quadrant syphilis, known felon, can not only shit talk to, but then hold hostage.
Yeah. The Civil War thing, Q introduces because, the Q is going through the Continuum is going through its own Civil War, and he likens it all to the American Civil War. There's so much imagery that they're using here. And I want to put one of my biggest gripes on the table. In the Continuum, you have the establishment, right, which is the status quo. And then you have Q's rebellion faction that says, we want individual liberty. We want to be our own thing. We don't want to subscribe to your government values anymore. If you had to put him on a side between the Union and the Confederate, where would it have been appropriate to put the rebel forces, Joe?
Yeah. Are you saying that RQ should have been in gray?
He should have been a fucking Confederate. Like, you're going to bring this imagery and this metaphor on the table. I mean, again, this Kenneth Billingsley or whatever, on top of not bothering to watch back to whatever the fucking episode with Amanda Rogers was, on top of the fact you don't know your own Star Trek history, you don't know your fucking American history. Like, don't jam this goddamn American Civil War in my face and then put people blatantly on the wrong fucking sides, because
if you're going to use this as an allegory, use it correctly.
Yeah, because you don't want, John Delancey's Q to be associated with slavery because, oh no, it's not like he hasn't done worse things in his fucking history. So that's a big problem I had with this. And again, I keep going back to Amanda Rogers. Q's plan, they want this humanizing element to radically transform the Q. They want this human spirit and flame to come into their old stagnant establishment. Where is she at? Last time we saw her, she went off with Q to go embrace being a Q. Everything he wants out of a baby with Janeway, she has already brought into the Continuum. So, like, I would have liked a throwaway line saying, oh, by the way, she didn't work out. We executed her. All that stuff I did with Picard was a dog and pony show. She's dead. We killed her.
Right.
Because without it, she's alive. She's out there somewhere. She's answered all these questions. Give me some closure on that.
Yeah, for an episode that was trying to lean into its continuity, the fact that at no point anyone ever addressed that Amanda Rogers was already this thing, that's a really good point.
I also like the line that Janeway has, speaking of Warp 10. She turns to Q and she says, I could never have a child with someone I didn't love, much less give it up. Kenneth, did you not watch Threshold? She had a child with Tom Paris. They made the decision to leave their children, their lizard baby children, on a planet alone without their mommy in the Delta Quadrant as they flew away. Like, Janeway, you goddamn liar.
It's like about the episode itself, I have nothing else to say. It's stupid. They end up having the fucking Q baby, and it solves all the problems, and Janeway's the godmother. Hooray, I guess. It reduces the Q to toothless cartoon characters that even Tom Paris can talk shit to.
Yeah.
And that is fucking sad as shit.
when they leave Suzy Q behind on Voyager in the middle of like the supernovas, she's deciding that they're going to need to go into the continuum to get involved, right? She's going to bring the crew in to try and track down Janeway and Q1. She gives Roxanne, she gives B'Elanna hypertech, right? She's like, I'm going to show you how to get in the continuum. We are going to fly into a supernova, and I'm going to give you some tweaks so you can overclock your shields so they're 10 times more powerful than they were before, and we're going to be able to survive the supernova and the transformation into the Q continuum. Like, is that technology that gets to stick around because you now have the most powerful shields in the galaxy? You want to talk about technology that's going to revolutionize that? And then
there was enough of a suggestion in that scene that said to me that this was like overclocking, just like you said. You could do it for a real quick minute to like sneak in to the supernova hole into the continuum, but wouldn't necessarily be a long-term plan. That didn't bother me as much. You know what did bother me?
The fact that they just flew the fucking ship into the Q continuum and there was no like adjustment period for the crew. They just show up with flintlock muskets and go to town.
Yeah. Yeah, they just show up with Q weapons, just like, hey, we're here, guys. Like, no explanation. They just have them because the female Q gave them to them, I guess. But they never address it in any way, shape, or form. That bothered me way fucking more. But at that point, I was so numb to what was happening.
Did what bother you was the fact that Q1 and Janeway get imprisoned by the Confederate forces and are going to be executed until the Voyager crew has to diligently jailbreak them? How many jailbreak? This is hot on the heels of Warlord jailbreak too. I want to jump back into Warlord. Warlord was so fucking good and high stakes and crazy. Could there be any stakes higher than what we're seeing right now in this episode? You have not only Q's in the middle of a crazy civil war that's resulting in supernovas all over the galaxy. You've got the captain about to be executed at the stake, and there's just no feeling of urgency or danger or anything. Like, that whole battle sequence is just a complete fucking waste. You compare that to Warlord, where it's like, I felt like there was real impact and gravity, and there was none of that in this. But what really bothered you?
That they thought they made a good episode. That they thought this was a great idea. Even John Delancey thought it was good. That nobody involved in the production and writing and directing and acting on this episode apparently took a second to say, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe we shouldn't make the most interesting, mysterious, scary, persistent antagonist force in our entire franchise out to be fucking clown shoes that nobody should ever be afraid of ever again.
Maybe we shouldn't have Tom Paris and Harry Kim stunt all over a god.
But you know what?
It gets worse.
Certainly explains what they did to the Borg.
What?
You got more pain to come, my friend.
I don't know, man. This is a real low point for this show. Like, we've seen some bad episodes, but like this, and have fun editing this podcast. I don't know if you're gonna be able to make this into anything at all worth listening to for the poor people at home who might have already braved through Q and the Gray just to get to this podcast. But
yeah, I kind of feel bad, guys. Like, it's hard for us to be funny about this shit. Like, when Peter and I, we wanted to do this podcast because we appreciate Trek on a similar level, obviously. And we've discussed that many times throughout the years. And so I knew he was going to hate this. I knew I was going to hate it. I already seen it. I already knew I hated it. But I guess
there's just nothing fun.
Yeah,
I mean, like, they tried to tell a fun episode with all the zany hijinks that go on, but the best I can say about this is that Q calls Neelix a bar rodent, yeah. And that we get to see the Federation observing a really cool supernova and seeing a bunch of scientists geek out emotionally over it. And that's it. The rest of it is garbage scene after garbage scene in TV that should have never happened. You've taken a very powerful storytelling piece out of the Star Trek pantheon and shit all over it and turned it into a flea market novelty. You've told a historically incorrect portrayal of the Civil War.
You've taken the best part about All Good Things, possibly one of the most moving and incredible hours of television ever made, and fucked it into the dirt. Because how is that Q the same dude as this guy? How is that even fucking possible? It's not. It's fucking not. And the fact that it happened is bad enough. The fact that nobody involved in the production of this fucking episode apparently had the sense God gave a bunch of rocks to know what damage they were doing and how fucking bad this is.
Every single person on that should have been like, you know what? I really wish this was like a Kazon episode. I wish this was another Vidian episode. I wish that Voyager hadn't lost its balls and would have stuck to the Delta Quadrant plan of introducing new ideas and playing with their own toys instead of going back into the next gen toy box to desperately try and claw viewership numbers back up. Because it's like everything that they seem to be touching from the Alpha Quadrant lately, they're just mishandling. And again, it makes me want them to go back to the initial vision of the show and give me new stuff and play in this new space and tell new stories instead of going back to old stories and pooping on them.
I would much prefer them to take newer, greasier shits than these. That's for gosh darn sure. Yeah. Anyway, what do we have next? Fuck it. It's all we can do is move on.
I'm trying to think in my mind, like, was this worse than Elogium?
Yes. Yes, it was. This made me angry. Elogium just bored me.
What is the worst episode that you think we've watched up to this point?
I would still say that overall, as far as like beginning to end, terrible. I think Twisted's a unique combination of both boring and ridiculous in a way that is uniquely awful. I would say Elogium is a worse watch because it's boring. But this is an all-time low because it destroys something beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, even if you take Tattoo and some of the... I think I'm going to go ahead right now and give you Q and the Gray as the worst episode of Voyager we've seen so far. And I'll have to go back and check my notes when we do the season 3 rip. But for the personal damage, the offensive level of insult that this thing manages to deliver, I think this is the worst. But moving on from here, man.
Only up from here. What do we got?
We got season 3, episode 12. I don't know how to say this word. Macrocosm.
You got it.
After returning from a first contact mission, Janeway, Neelix, and the Doctor must retake Voyager from an infestation of microorganisms. Well, you play with neural gel packs and you get sick with the viruses.
Hey, it's like you know what they're gonna do.
I don't know what they're gonna do because Janeway and Neelix and the Doctor were out, so that means Neelix wasn't around to be poisoning the ship with cheese. So this is going to be interesting to see where this microorganism came from if it's not the local saboteur Neelix.
It's above average episode. It's really like the Janeway action show, which is a it'll be a nice improvement. You will actually possibly enjoy the hour you spend watching this. Yeah, don't watch Q and the Gray.
Stay the fuck away from it. I mean, I wish that we could just say that it never happened, but there's going to be a third installment.
Yep. We're not done. And not to put us on an even worse note, but what I said before is true. This prefaces the damage they do to the Borg. I don't know if you've heard that rap on Voyager or not.
No.
But a common complaint about Voyager is that Voyager ruined the Borg. And I would say that is at least partially true. It'll be interesting to see.
Is it tied into this episode specifically, or is that its own story?
No, just sort of like a trend that they don't understand why certain things are as cool as they are. And they write them in ways that destroy some of that mystique.
Yeah.
Well,
I really feel bad for Suzy Blackson, man. Like, I think it was a shitty character. I didn't like, she felt real two-dimensional, and I think that her stint as Clear in Next Gen showed that she had a lot of depth that she could bring to these characters, and I was very disappointed that this is the way they chose to bring her. She played a Vulcan at some point, too, I think, in Next Gen.
Yeah, Dr. Solar, yeah.
This, for major screen time on her, just a shit bad episode that did nothing but bad, and everybody should feel bad, and instead everybody loved it. This is a real head scratcher for me, Joe. I don't get it. Let me banish this fucking thing. I gotta get away from this.
All right, fair enough. Thanks for listening, I guess. Whatever. Life is pain. None of it matters anyway. Goodbye.